You are not weak because you suffer. You are not failing because life is hard. You are becoming. And a man who lived in chains, a man who had nothing, a man whose body was broken by another man's hands, that man understood something that most people never learn in a lifetime of comfort. His name was Epictetus, and today his words will change the way you see your pain. This is a graded lesson for English learners who want wisdom, not just words. So sit back, listen carefully, and let what you are about to hear settle deep inside you. Because here is the truth that Epictetus spent his whole life teaching. Suffering is not your enemy. It is your teacher. Remember that. We will come back to it again and again today. If this kind of lesson speaks to you, if you want more wisdom like this every week, subscribe right now. There are more lessons coming, and you do not want to miss them. Now, let me tell you about a boy who was born with nothing, not even a name that was truly his own. Lesson 1. The life nobody wanted. The year is around 50 AD. In a small city called Hierapolis, in what is now the country of Turkey, a boy is born into slavery. He has no choice in this. He has no say. From his first breath, he belongs to someone else. His name, Epictetus, is not even a real name. In Greek, it simply means acquired, purchased, owned. That is what the world thinks of him from the very beginning. He is sold. He travels to Rome. He becomes the property of a man named Epictetus, a wealthy freedman who works closely with the Roman Emperor Nero. Epictetus has power. He has money. He has status. And now he has a young slave boy who will do whatever he is told. Most people in this situation collapse. They give up. They decide that because the world has given them nothing, they have nothing to give back. They stop trying. They stop thinking. They stop hoping. Epictetus does not do this. Something inside him refuses. His master allows him one small privilege. He is permitted to attend philosophy lessons with a teacher named Musonius Rufus, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers of that era. And in those lessons, in that small room, listening to ideas about the mind and about freedom, and about what a human being truly is, something wakes up inside the young slave. He begins to understand something. He is not the first slave to sit in those lessons, but he is different from the others. He listens differently. He thinks differently. He does not just hear the words of Musonius Rufus. He absorbs them. He tests them. He applies them to the reality of his own life, to the cold floor where he sleeps, to the commands he must obey, to the face of the man who owns him. And slowly, carefully, something begins to build inside him. Not anger, not bitterness. Something much harder to destroy than either of those. The chains on his body are real, but the chains on his mind, those are a choice. Now there is a story, and we do not know for certain if it is completely true, but it has been passed down for nearly 2,000 years. One day, Epictetus, his master, decides to test the boy, to hurt him. He grabs Epictetus by the leg and begins to twist it. Epictetus looks at him calmly and says, "You are going to break it." Epictetus twists harder. The leg breaks. And Epictetus simply says, "Did I not tell you that you would break it?" No screaming, no begging, no rage. Just a man who had already decided that what happened to his body did not define what happened to his mind. Think about that for one moment. Think about what kind of person responds to pain that way. Not someone who feels nothing. Not someone cold and empty inside. But someone who has trained himself. Someone who has looked at suffering and said, "You do not own me." Most people think freedom means having no chains. Epictetus knew that real freedom means having no fear. They took his name. They took his body. They took his right to choose where he lived, where he worked, and who he served. But they could not take the one thing that mattered most. His mind was still his. His choices, the choices inside, were still his. And that was enough. That was everything. After the Emperor Nero died, and after years of service, Epictetus was eventually freed. He was no longer a slave. And what did he do with that freedom? He did not chase money. He did not chase power. He did not try to become what Rome said was successful. He opened a small school. He sat in a simple room, and he began to teach. He taught poor students and rich students. He taught soldiers and senators. He taught people who had lost everything and people who were afraid of losing everything. And his message to all of them was the same. You are stronger than your circumstances. You are more than your suffering. And the pain you are running from right now, that pain is not your enemy. It is trying to teach you something. In the next lesson, we are going to look at exactly what Epictetus taught. The idea that changed the lives of emperors and prisoners and soldiers. An idea so simple that you can understand it in 60 seconds, but so powerful that most people spend their whole lives ignoring it. Lesson 2. The one thing they could not take. Epictetus taught many things, but everything he ever said, every lesson, every conversation, every idea came back to one single truth. Some things are in your control, and some things are not. That is it. That is the whole foundation. Simple words, but most people never truly understand them. Let him explain it. Your body, not in your control. It gets sick. It gets old. It gets hurt. You cannot stop that completely. Your reputation, not in your control. People will say things about you. Some will be true, some will be lies. You cannot stop that either. Your money, not fully in your control. Markets crash, jobs end, plans fail. The world does not ask your permission. Other people's opinions, not in your control. You can be kind, honest, and hard-working, and someone will still decide they do not like you. You cannot control that. Here's the truth. The only thing truly in your control is what happens inside you. Your thoughts, your judgments, your choices, your response to what life brings. That is yours. Completely. Always. Epictetus called this your prohairesis. It is a Greek word that means your power of choice, your will, the part of you that decides how you meet every moment. A prison guard can lock your body in a cell. He cannot lock your mind. A cruel boss can take your job. He cannot take your dignity unless you give it. A painful loss can break your heart, but it cannot break your character unless you let it. They took his freedom. They took his body. They could not take his mind. This is not just philosophy. This is a practical tool. And Epictetus was very clear about how to use it. Every time something hard happens, ask yourself one question. Is this in my control or not? If it is in your control, act. Do something. Make a decision. Take a step. If it is not in your control, release it. Not because you do not care, but because fighting what you cannot change is a war you will always lose. And losing that war costs you something far more valuable than the thing you were fighting for. It costs you your peace, your energy, your time. Now think about this. You lose your job. That is outside your control. But how you spend tomorrow morning, that is yours. You get sick. The illness is outside your control. But the attitude you bring to your recovery, completely yours. Someone betrays you. Their choice is outside your control. But what you do next, who you become because of it, that belongs to you. A weak mind blames the world for everything that goes wrong. A strong mind looks at the same world and asks, what can I do with this? That is the difference. Not talent, not luck, not background. Just the decision about where to place your attention. Epictetus lived this every single day. As a slave, he had almost nothing that was in his control. Almost nothing. But that small remaining space, that inner space of choice, he guarded it like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Because it was. And it is still the most valuable thing in yours. Suffering is not your enemy. It is your teacher. And what it is teaching you right now in whatever hard season you are walking through is this. You are not powerless. You never were. The power was always in the space between what happens and how you respond. Go back to that space. Live there. Build there. That is where Epictetus lived. And that is where your strength is waiting. Lesson 3. Pain is not punishment. There is a question that most people ask when life gets hard. Why is this happening to me? It feels natural. It feels human. When you lose something you love, when a plan falls apart, when the pain comes and does not leave, the mind reaches for an explanation. And the easiest explanation is this. I must have done something wrong. This must be punishment. I must deserve this. Epictetus looked at that idea and rejected it completely. Pain is not punishment. It is not failure. It is not the end. It is training. He used a simple image to explain this. He compared life to a wrestling school. In a wrestling school, you do not get better by watching. You get better by being thrown to the ground, again and again. And the opponent who throws you hardest is not your enemy. He is your most important teacher. Because without him, without that resistance, without that difficulty, you would never discover what you are truly made of. This is not a comfortable idea. Epictetus never tried to make you comfortable. He tried to make you honest. Look at your hardest moment, not the small difficulties, the real ones. The loss that changed you, the failure that broke you open, the rejection that made you question everything. Now think about this. What did that moment force you to do? What did it force you to become? What did you find inside yourself that you never knew was there before the hard thing arrived? Because that is what suffering does when you stop fighting it and start listening to it. It reveals you. It strips away everything you were pretending to be and shows you what is actually underneath. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. He was the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, emperor, commander, the ruler of millions of people. He had every comfort that the ancient world could offer. And yet every single morning he sat down and wrote to himself. Reminders, instructions, warnings. He wrote things like, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He was writing about Epictetus, about the idea that the obstacle is not separate from the path forward. The obstacle is the path forward. The difficulty is not blocking your growth. The difficulty is your growth. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. He did not need to struggle in the way Epictetus struggled, but he chose to think like a man who had. Because he understood that a mind trained by Stoic philosophy is stronger than any army, any wealth, any title. Now consider this. Most people look at pain and see a wall. Epictetus looked at pain and saw a door. The person who loses their business and builds something better, the person who goes through heartbreak and finally understands what they truly need. The person who hits rock bottom and discovers a strength they never knew they had. These people did not succeed despite their suffering. They succeeded because of it. The suffering was the school, and they chose to be students. Weak people say, "Why is this happening to me?" Strong people say, "What is this preparing me for?" That single shift from victim to student, from why to what, changes everything. Epictetus made that shift in a Roman slave house with a broken leg and no rights, and no future that the world could see. If he could make that shift there, you can make it wherever you are right now. Your pain is not wasted. It never was. It is building something inside you that comfort never could. The question is not whether the hard thing is happening. It already is. The question is whether you are willing to learn from it. Lesson 4. Stop complaining. Start choosing. You have had a hard day, maybe a hard week, maybe a hard year, and you talked about it. You told someone how unfair it was, how the situation was not your fault, how things should have been different, how life has not given you what you deserved. That is human. That is normal. And Epictetus understood it completely. Then he told you to stop. Not because your pain is not real. It is real. Not because your situation is not difficult. It may be very difficult. But because every minute you spend complaining is a minute you spend giving your power away. Think about what complaining actually does. It does not change the situation. The thing that hurt you is still there. It does not make you stronger. It reminds you again and again that something outside you has control over how you feel. It does not bring solutions. It brings more of the same feeling that created the complaint in the first place. Epictetus said something that is simple, but hits hard. People are not disturbed by events. They are disturbed by their opinions about events. Read that again slowly. The event happens. That part is done. But your opinion about the event, the story you tell yourself about what it means, what it says about your life, what it says about your future, that story is still being written. And you are the one writing it. When you complain, you are writing a story where you are powerless, where life is against you, where there is nothing you can do but wait and hope and blame. Epictetus refused to write that story, even as a slave, even with a broken leg, even with no rights and no name that was truly his own. He refused. Stay with me. You wake up. The day is already hard. Something has already gone wrong before you have finished your first cup of tea. What happens in the next 60 seconds matters more than you think. You can tell yourself the day is ruined. You can reach for your phone and send a message complaining to a friend. You can sit in the feeling of unfairness and let it spread through your whole morning. Or you can ask one simple question. What can I choose right now? Not what can you fix, not what can you control completely. Just what can you choose? The next action, the next word, the next step forward. If you complain, you surrender. If you blame, you surrender. If you wait for someone else to come and make things better, you surrender. But the moment you choose even one small choice in the direction you want to go, you take the power back. Immediately. Not tomorrow. Right now. Complainers ask life to become easier. Stoics train themselves to become stronger. That is the whole difference. Not intelligence, not talent, not luck. Just the decision made over and over again to respond instead of react, to choose instead of complain, to move instead of wait. Epictetus watched other slaves collapse under the weight of their situation. He watched men with far more freedom than him crumble under far smaller pressures, and he understood why. They had given their inner world to the outer world. They had let what happened outside decide what happened inside. He never made that trade, and he spent the rest of his life teaching others not to make it either. So the next time life gives you something hard, and it will pause before the complaint forms, ask yourself what Epictetus would ask. Is this in my control? If not, release it. If yes, even one small part of it, act on it. Right now, today. That is not weakness dressed up as acceptance. That is strength in its purest form. Lesson 5. The Man Who Proved It. It is easy to talk about Stoic philosophy in a classroom. It is easy to nod along to the ideas of Epictetus when you are sitting in a comfortable chair reading words on a page with a warm drink beside you. But what happens when the ideas are tested not by a difficult week at work, not by a disappointing relationship, by something real, by something that strips everything away and leaves you with nothing but your mind? James Stockdale found out. In 1965, Stockdale was a United States Navy pilot flying combat missions over Vietnam. He was experienced. He was decorated. He was respected. And then his plane was shot down over North Vietnam. He ejected from the aircraft. He fell from the sky. And as he descended toward the ground, knowing that he was about to be captured, he said to himself, "I am leaving the world of technology and entering the world of Epictetus." Before he became a pilot before the war, Stockdale had studied philosophy. He had read the Enchiridion, the small handbook of Epictetus, the one that Arian compiled from the slave philosopher's teachings. He had read it not as history, not as interesting theory. He had read it as instruction, as preparation. He did not know then what he was preparing for. He was held as a prisoner of war in Hanoi for 7 years. He was tortured many times. He was kept in isolation. He was used as a tool of propaganda by his captors. They wanted him to appear on camera well-treated and cooperative to show the world that American prisoners were being handled humanely. Stockdale refused. And to make his refusal impossible to ignore, to ensure they could not film him and use his image, he deliberately injured his own face. He gave up his physical comfort, his safety, his body, to protect something he considered more important: his dignity, his integrity, his inner freedom. Hear me on this. This is not a story about a soldier being brave. This is a story about a philosophy being real. Epictetus had taught nearly 2,000 years before that prison camp that the only true freedom is the freedom of your own choices, that your body can be captured, your time can be taken, your comfort can be destroyed, but your character, your judgment, your decision about who you will be in this moment, that belongs to you, always. Stockdale lived that idea in conditions that most of us will never face. And he survived. Not just physically, he came home with his mind intact, his values intact, his sense of self intact. If you complain, you lose something inside. If you blame, you lose something inside. If you wait for the conditions to be right before you decide who you are, you lose something inside that is very hard to recover. Suffering is not your enemy. It is your teacher. Stockdale did not leave that prison camp broken. He left it knowing with absolute certainty that a human being can face almost anything if their inner world remains their own. You will probably never face what Stockdale faced, but you are facing something. Everyone is. And the question Epictetus puts to you is the same question it put to a pilot falling from the sky over Vietnam. Who are you going to be right now, in this moment, in this difficulty, with what you have where you are? That answer only you can give it, and nothing outside you can take it away. Lesson 6. Voluntary Hardship. Epictetus did not just teach his students to endure the hard things that life brought them. He told them to go looking for hard things on purpose. This sounds strange, maybe even a little extreme. Why would anyone choose difficulty when comfort is available? Why sleep on a hard floor when you have a soft bed? Why go hungry when there is food on the table? Why walk in the cold when you can stay warm inside? Because comfort is a trap. Not always. Not in every moment. But comfort, when it becomes the thing you are most afraid to lose, stops being a gift and starts being a prison. A very soft prison. A very quiet one. But a prison all the same. Epictetus and the Stoics practiced what they called voluntary hardship. They would go without food for a day. They would wear thin clothing in winter. They would sleep on the floor when they had a bed. Not to punish themselves. Not because they enjoyed pain, but to practice, to remind themselves that they could survive without the comfort. That the comfort was nice, but it was not necessary. That they were stronger than their preferences. Let me make this simple. When you never practice being uncomfortable, discomfort becomes a threat. When discomfort feels like a threat, you avoid it. When you spend your life avoiding discomfort, you stop growing. You stop reaching. You stop trying the things that scare you. Because everything that matters in life sits just on the other side of discomfort. The difficult conversation you have been putting off. That is discomfort. The new skill that makes you feel like a beginner again. That is discomfort. The decision to leave the safe path and try the thing you actually want. That is discomfort. You skip the hard conversation. You skip the uncomfortable truth. You skip the difficult choice that would change everything. And then you wonder why nothing changes. Epictetus would not wonder. He would say you have trained yourself to choose comfort, so your life has given you exactly what you trained for. This is not cruelty. This is honesty. And in the long run, honesty is far kinder than comfort. So what does voluntary hardship look like today? It does not have to be sleeping on the floor. It does not have to be extreme. It just has to be intentional. Wake up 30 minutes earlier than you want to. Do the task you have been avoiding first before the easy ones. Have the conversation you have been delaying. Say no to something comfortable when you know the uncomfortable choice is the right one. Do one hard thing today. Not because life demands it, because you are choosing it. Because you are reminding yourself quietly and clearly that you are in charge. Not your habits, not your fears, not your need for ease. Comfortable people are afraid of pain because they have never practiced meeting it. Strong people have already met it. They chose it before it could choose them. And because of that, when the hard thing arrives without warning, they are not surprised. They are ready. That readiness is what Epictetus spent his whole life building. First, inside himself. Then inside every student who sat across from him in that small school in Nicopolis. He was not teaching philosophy. He was teaching survival. He was teaching freedom. He was teaching people how to become the kind of person that life cannot break. You can become that person too. But you have to be willing to practice. Not when it is forced on you. Now. On purpose. By choice. Epictetus built that school in Nicopolis with almost nothing. A small room. Simple benches. No grand building. No wealthy patrons at first. And his students came anyway because they knew that what he was teaching could not be found in comfort. It could only be found in the honest, daily practice of choosing difficulty over ease. That is the school he is still running 2,000 years later. And you are in it right now. The lesson is the same. The practice starts today. Lesson 7. The freedom inside the cage. There is a word that most people misunderstand. Freedom. When people say they want freedom, they usually mean they want fewer problems, less pain, more comfort, more control over what happens to them. They want the cage to disappear. Epictetus never promised that. He never said the cage would disappear. He said something far more powerful. He said that the cage does not matter as much as you think. Because the most important kind of freedom has nothing to do with what is outside you. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist and a Jewish man living in Europe during the Second World War. He was sent to Auschwitz, one of the most brutal concentration camps in human history. He lost nearly everything: his family, his home, his work, his freedom in every physical sense. And in the middle of that darkness, he discovered the same truth that Epictetus had lived 2,000 years before him. He wrote that everything can be taken from a person but one thing, the last of human freedoms: the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Take a breath. Read that again. Everything can be taken, but not that. Not your attitude. Not your choice about how you will meet this moment. That remains yours as long as you are alive and thinking. Frankl watched people in the camps. He observed who survived and who did not. And he noticed something that had nothing to do with physical strength or age or luck. The people who found meaning in their suffering, who held on to a sense of purpose, who refused to let the darkness define them completely, those people had a better chance. Not because the suffering was less. It was the same suffering, the same cold, the same hunger, the same cruelty. But their inner world was different. And that inner world made the difference between collapse and endurance. This is Epictetus. Across 2,000 years. Across completely different lives and completely different kinds of pain. The same truth keeps arriving at the same door. If they take your job, you still have your mind. If they take your home, you still have your choices. If they take your comfort, you still have your will. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Most people spend their lives chasing outer freedom. More money, so they feel free. More status, so they feel free. More control over other people and situations, so they feel free. And they chase and find that the feeling never quite arrives. Because outer freedom is always fragile. It depends on things you cannot fully control. Inner freedom is different. Inner freedom cannot be taken by a job loss, or a broken relationship, or a diagnosis, or a disappointment. It can only be surrendered, and only by you. Epictetus surrendered nothing. Frankl surrendered nothing. Stockdale surrendered nothing. Not because their lives were easy, because they understood where real freedom lives. And it does not live in your bank account. It does not live in your circumstances. It lives in the space between what happens to you and what you choose to do next. Suffering is not your enemy. It is your teacher. And what it teaches when you finally stop fighting it and start listening is that you are freer than you think. Right now, in this situation, with this pain, you are freer than you know. That is what Epictetus discovered in a Roman slave house. That is what Frankl discovered in Auschwitz. That is what Stockdale discovered in a prison camp in Hanoi. And it is what you are discovering right now in whatever hard place you are standing in today. You have been listening for a while now. And if any part of this lesson has stayed with you, if any sentence has landed somewhere deep, then Epictetus has already done his work. The man who had nothing has given you something. And that is exactly the kind of thing he would have expected from suffering. So let us bring it all together. Epictetus was born a slave. His body was broken. His rights were zero. And from that place, with those conditions, he built one of the most powerful philosophies the world has ever known. Not because life was kind to him, because he refused to wait for life to be kind. His story teaches us 4 things. 1. You cannot control what happens to you. You can always control how you respond. That space between event and response is where your real life is lived. Guard it carefully. 2. Pain is not punishment, it is preparation. Every hard season you have survived has built something inside you that comfort never could. Do not waste what your suffering has already given you. 3. Complaining gives your power to the thing that hurt you. Choosing takes it back. You do not have to choose something big, just choose something. Right now, today. That is enough to begin. 4. The strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who avoided suffering. They are the ones who welcomed it, who sat with it, who let it teach them, and who came out the other side knowing something about themselves that only difficulty can reveal. Suffering is not your enemy. It is your teacher. It always was. Now here is my question for you, and I want you to think about this honestly. What is the hardest thing you have ever faced in your life? And looking back now, what did it teach you? What did it give you that you did not have before? Tell me in the comments below. Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If this lesson spoke to you, share it with one person who needs it right now. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now. There are more lessons coming, more wisdom, more of this. Keep listening every day. This is a journey for English learners who want more than words, and you are already on it. Until next time, stay strong.